Well, good afternoon to you all. I'm delighted that you're here. I'm Darin Davis. It's my honor to serve as Vice President for University Mission and also Director of the Institute for Faith and Learning. We're doing here today something unprecedented as far as I know, to gather here together in the spirit of friendship, to reflect upon friendship and its importance for our community here at Baylor, and also to worship together. Two really fine things to do at the beginning of an academic year, and we're grateful for your presence. The mission of Baylor University is to educate men and women for worldwide leadership and service by integrating academic excellence and Christian commitment within a caring community. Our mission at Baylor, though, invites us to focus on all of those words, and I want us to focus on maybe the last couple of words in the mission statement today. What does it mean to be a caring community? And not a caring community in a sort of generic sense, but a caring community that is animated by our faith in Christ. What would it mean to see the character of our community here at Baylor as one of abiding love, echoing the words of Jesus in the Gospel of John? What would it be to have a view of community that is not so much opt-in, opt-out, kind of voluntary association, but one that invites and indeed requires a deeper and stronger commitment to one another's good? What would it be to have a view of community that urges us to stand next to one another and encourages us to challenge one another, even correct one another, to share joys and sorrows, and to see those kinds of relationships as bound together as essential for our view of real happiness? That is to say, in Baylor's mission statement, the talk of community is very, very good. But maybe friendship is better. And so, to think together about friendship, to think beyond mere acquaintance or business contact or Facebook friend or social media contact, to unpack this understanding of Christian friendship as mediated by the God who loves us, and to see friendship as not merely the receiving of friendship, but also the offering of it. To realize that the way in which we're called to befriend one another requires us to see everyone as a gift. And to see, too, these relationships as walking in a kind of journey for not merely a lifetime here, but for eternity, drawn together in hope. We are sojourners on the way, companions in hope. I'm so grateful that 4 of my friends have come to join you in reflecting about these questions, and I'd like to introduce them now, beginning here with Bryson. Bryson Wiley is a native of Houston and a 2016 graduate of Baylor, where he was a Baylor Business Fellow and studied finance, French, and mathematics. During his undergraduate career, he worked both on campus in the Spiritual Life Center, and he also worked off campus at La Vega High School and Conley High School as a tutor and substitute teacher. He's currently pursuing a PhD in statistics at Baylor, and he has hopes of finding a great job one day where he can do math and statistics to his heart's content. I'm glad I have a friend like Bryson. Alice Knable is a senior university scholar majoring in pre-medicine and great texts. Her hometown is Stillwater, Minnesota. But she tells me that the Texans she has met at Baylor have slowly been converting her to say things like y'all. She is involved on campus in the Crane Scholars Program at St. Peter's Catholic Student Center, as a fellow in the Honors Residential College, and as vice president of the Christian Pre-Health Fellowship. She enjoys running. I actually went, well, I never can claim to have actually gone running with her. I went walking with her once. No, I was running, you were walking. Cheryl Gotchis was appointed Vice President of Human Resources and Chief Human Resources Officer in May 2016, after serving as Associate Vice President for HR since 2014. In her role, she manages and coordinates employment functions at Baylor University that include employee relations, benefits, compensation, recruiting, employee learning, HR compliance, data management, and leadership consulting. She is a Baylor graduate holding a BA and MA in Business and Organizational Communication. She's also married to Rich and the parents of Andrew, who I just met, who is a Baylor freshman, and also Jacob and Hannah. And finally, Emmanuel Roldan, a 2016 graduate of George W. Truett Theological Seminary. During his time at Baylor, he served as a resident chaplain at Brooks Residential Flats and for three years, and also was a hospital chaplain intern at Hillcrest Baylor Scott and White. He's recently become the pastor of Primera Iglesia Bautista in Waco. In his free time, that is what kind of free time do pastors have, Emmanuel?
Sundays between 4 and 5.
4 to 5 on Sunday. He enjoys exploring local restaurants and mountain biking at Cameron Park. Will you join me now in welcoming these four? So each of these will speak for about 10 minutes, either off the cuff or having prepared something to reflect on these deep questions about how friends help us to understand our vocation, or how our closest friends help us grow in virtue, or how we might at Baylor see this community as a kind of gathering place for unlikely friends. We might also want to wonder about the challenges of friendship or the limits of speaking in terms of friendship, especially in teaching and learning environments or in the workplace. So Bryson, please begin. Thank you so much.
Yes, sir. So when I arrived at Baylor, I actually had a little bit of trouble making friends just because when I came here, I knew I was only going to be here for 4 years, or I thought I was going to be here for 4 years ago, and now I'm here for 4 more years, so we'll see. I had to adjust that, but I didn't expect to be here very long, and also I had a couple of very good friends back home in Houston, so I was like, I don't really need to make, close friends here and then have to leave them, and then I just, spent that time getting invested just to break it off later on. So I kind of held back. I've met a lot of people. I do have very good friends now, but just it was a process over the time. And one specific thing that I think back to is when I was a freshman, my roommate, we met each other at line camp, or actually we met each other at a camp before in the summer between our junior and senior year, and one of my best friends went with me to that camp. So the three of us were together, and we were all expecting to come to Baylor. So the three of us were like, we're going to room together when we get to Baylor. So that's awesome. You got your roommate already. You don't have to worry about it later. So senior year goes on. Turns out my best friend got a full ride to Texas State. And so I couldn't tell him, hey, let that go and still come be my roommate at Baylor. It's not fair. So he ended up not coming, but I had already promised or signed up to stay with this one guy. So the two of us, we go and we stay together. And everything starts out fine. The first week, it's kind of like the honeymoon phase. You meet them. You guys are having fun. You do a couple things together. We went to the gym every now and then, played a couple of video games together. And then school started. And people who know me know how serious I am about school. And so when school started and I was doing my work, my only study place was in the dorm. And so I was, in my little corner back when Martin was just for God. And I had my one little spot, and I was studying. And he would come in, but he would still want to talk. and he would still want to play games, and he would still want to watch TV, and he would still want to do all the things that, there was a time for, and just, unfortunately for me, there was never time for that. And so we started to kind of bump heads a lot, and it got bad, and just that year didn't end, like, we ended up not being all that close when the year was over. And as I reflect back on that, I still feel really bad about just how things ended. But as time went on, we still would see each other from time to time around campus, and so our friendship grew back together. But that kind of shows just how, once I was concentrated on something else, it was really hard for me to be open to other people. And so I had that issue the whole time. And I didn't realize it until just recently, but even though I necessarily didn't always connect with other people, I still found ways to get friendship out of my time here. And it's going to sound funny, but most of my friends, or the people that I would consider, friends and close, are actually faculty and staff. If you ask faculty and staff that know me, they'll say that they probably see me at least once a week. And I don't try to do that in a annoying way where I come by and I'm like, hey, what's the answer to this question? Hey, what are we going to study next week? I don't do that. I honestly, I will go around campus when I have free time, which I shouldn't have too much free time considering I'm a grad student. And so please don't tell the graduate department that I'm doing stuff that I'm not supposed to be doing. But I will go around campus, and I'll just sit down and I'll spend time with different professors. And so, I mean, literally, I'll go, Draper, I'll go to the business school, I'll go to spiritual life office, I'll go to the math department, I'll go to the BSB, anywhere where there's somebody that I know, I try to at least go and see them once, some more than others, but that's because I see these professors and I see these faculty, these staff as my friends. I go to them, they have good stories, I like stories, and every now and then I have a good story I can tell them. And so it's a good way to foster that and get that to go. A good example of that, this summer I had some trouble with my apartment. Just stuff wasn't going well, and so I had to move. So I got a new apartment. We were moving stuff over. My mom and my brothers came to help me kind of move and clean up and stuff. And I had some help from the staff in the spiritual life office. They came, and they actually helped me find the apartment, and they helped me move some bigger things. So we do all of this Friday, and we finish, and that night we're all sitting around, my mom, my brothers, myself, and we're eating. And my brother's 14 years old, and he leans over me like this. He looks at me, and he's like, Bryson, he's like, you got a lot of friends out here? And I'm like, yeah, I guess so. And he's like, well, you do realize that all your friends are middle-aged women, right? And I looked at him, and I was like, okay, yeah. But, I mean, that doesn't get me upset, and that doesn't, I hear that, and I'm like, that's all right, because it's not that, I'm going to them, and I'm like, hey, let me have $1 every day. I'm not going and taking stuff from them. I just have a sincere relationship with them and with everyone else because they've invested so much in me, and I want to be able to give something back. Teachers work really hard here, and Baylor's got some really good teachers, but I feel like students, we typically only concerned about us and what we've got going on, so we never really put interest in what their lives are like. And they just work so hard, so I feel like it should be a two-way thing, and it can't always be because professors have stuff to do, and so they should definitely do their work, and we have stuff we're supposed to be doing, and we definitely should be doing our work. Again, I'm working on that. But I definitely think that the friendships that I've been able to foster here on campus have been with the people that work here, and I'm so thankful for that because they got me through the last 4 years. And even though now I'm getting better at being close with the people around me and making genuine friends with the students in my program and students I might see around campus, but I hope that I can keep a lot of these relationships for the next 4 years and for the rest of the time to come. And so that's been my experience with friendship here at Baylor, and it's been a good one.
So, hi y'all, I'm Alice. I'm saying y'all. I didn't even think about that. So I'm not quite as good at speaking off the cuff as Bryson is, so I'm going to read what I have to say. So please forgive me. So hi. I'm going to approach the topic of friendship the best way I know how, and that is through my own experiences. Experiences, albeit shaped and formed by a few particular authors. I would like to speak to you all today as a pre-medical student, for that is what I am. I will speak of the importance of friendship in my calling now as a student and what I see to be my future calling as a physician. I think we can all agree that friendships are good and important. Aristotle says, "No one would choose to live without friends, even if he had all the other goods." While Elred of Rivaux notes that in friendship, eternity blossoms, truth shines forth, and charity grows sweet. Cicero calls friendship the finest gift of the gods have given us, for it is our best source of goodness and happiness. Finally, Thomas Aquinas says that there is nothing on this earth more to be prized than friendship. But I want to give you some specific instances of friendships in my life, and specifically friendships over my last 4 years as a student. I will begin with a story that taught me the importance of friendship as relating to my calling as a student. A story that made me incredibly grateful that I go to a school like Baylor, where I am blessed by many good and loyal friends. Cicero writes, "When fortune smiles on us, friendship adds luster to that smile. When she frowns, friendship absorbs her part and share of that frown, and thus makes it easier to bear." I studied abroad in Maastricht the fall of my sophomore year, and when I came back, I was immediately plunged into a world of pre-med curriculum. Suddenly, instead of strolling down Paris streets in the evening with some of my best friends, I was shut in my dorm room, frantically trying to cram organic chemistry, psychology, and genetics into my head. Worse, the classes I usually enjoy the most, great texts, started to become a burden to me. I was in great texts and drama, and the semester project was to write the first act of a screenplay. Instead of being excited by this challenge, I was terrified that I wouldn't be able to write it and maintain my GPA, my extracurriculars, and my roles in leadership in 2 pre-health organizations. So doing the only thing I thought logical to do in this situation, I simply cut myself off from time with friends, buckled down, and selflessly worked harder. I remember going to the dining hall and trying to avoid eye contact with my friends seated at our favorite table in Memorial, as I hastily shoved a sandwich, an apple, and some potato chips into my to-go box. I remember a particular friend of mine, Ross, who would look at me ironically whenever he caught me, to-go box in hand, saying, "Too busy again?" I would hurry back to my desk in Memorial, eyes glued to my textbook, as I tried to navigate putting a sandwich in my mouth without looking at it. It's kind of hard. My obsession with efficiency got so extreme that I even started brushing my teeth in the shower. Well, my first genetics test rolled around. I had put in as much time as humanly possible, and what were the results? Well, surprisingly to me, and maybe not so surprisingly to y'all, I got a C. I was shocked. I had never done so poorly on a major exam at Baylor before, and I couldn't understand what I'd done wrong. Almost in despair, I didn't know what to do. What was worse, I started losing my motivation. What had before fascinated me in science now seemed dry and didactic. I no longer dreamed over what medical school I would go to, where I would travel for medical missions, etc. The future no longer seemed like an adventure waiting to unfold, but a lonely and scary place where a transcript filled with failure would haunt me. Yes, I was being a bit dramatic. However, this is where I'm very glad to go to Baylor and had friends who would come alongside me. It started with friends who were willing to go get to-go boxes with me, who would force me to interact even when I said I just needed to study, who would help me with my organic chemistry homework, and who helped me to remember why I wanted to be a physician in the first place. These friends, as Provost Jones says when writing about holy friends, help me dream the dreams I would otherwise not dream. And what were the tangible results? The next genetics test, I got a 97%. But more importantly, I once more had joy in my life. Why? Because I had friends who knew that love was more important than any achievement, and friends who were patient and wise enough to show me this through example. The poet George Gordon Byron says that friendship is love without wings. My Baylor friends, instead of abandoning me when I began to ignore them, didn't leave me to fend for myself. Instead, these friends drew me back out of myself to remind me what was truly important. Another story, but another quote first, again from Cicero. For what is so ridiculous to take delight in a host of substantial things, such as honor, glory, a house, clothing, and the care of the body, and to not take delight in a living soul endowed with virtue, a soul that has the power to love, or so to speak, return love. So, fast forward to the fall of my junior year, exactly 1 year ago. I was still learning the importance of friendship when Dr. Farr Curlin from Duke University came to Baylor to speak at the annual medical conference here. Dr. Curlin, when asked how to know if one is called to medicine, said something that I will keep with me always. Take the sacraments and lead the Christian life. If you cannot do these things as a physician, then you heard the call to medicine wrong. I would like to posit that this is the difference between laying down one's life for one's friends, which we are called to do by Christ, and foolishly giving up true life, capital L life, for the professional goal of being a doctor, however worthy we think that goal might be. As a Christian, speaking at a Christian university, I feel free to say that without Christ, my life loses meaning. Reflecting on Dr. Curlin's words over the next couple of weeks, I realized that I had started to disregard living the Christian life as a pre-medical student, in that I had become self-centered in my goals as a student and my goals for my future. That is, I was, in my aforementioned struggle to be the perfect pre-med student, neglecting my duties to my friends, people made in the image of God. Furthermore, I had begun to realize that my faith had been taking the back burner. Yes, I still prayed, but these were hurried prayers. And yes, I still went to church every Sunday, but often with a bit of dismay if that Monday I had a test. Would I invest in the community of my church by at least staying around for coffee and donuts after Mass? Oh no, I was out of the door. But Dr. Curlin's words resonated with me, especially when he explained them in the terms of C.S. Lewis, who defines first things and second things, saying that you should always keep the first things first. Now, when I really thought about it, it was pretty clear to me that being a good friend to others, truly caring for people in my life, and leading a life that brought me closer to friendship with Christ were certainly first things. And things like career, which medical school I went to, etc., were second things. That semester, I decided that if, as an undergraduate student who was certainly less busy than a physician, I couldn't be a good Christian by being a good friend, it was time for me to pick another profession. So the following semester became an experiment for me. I took Dr. Curlin very literally. As a Catholic, I decided that by taking the sacraments, I should try to go to daily Mass every day, for the basis of any human friendship is friendship with God, and that by living the Christian life, I should always make time for my friends, be that a meal together, a long conversation, or a late-night study party. If I couldn't practice now how I wanted to live my life in medicine, it was not where I should be. Furthermore, even if I made it through medical school but had not learned the importance of loving the other, being a friend to my patients, I would not be a very good physician. So, what were the results of this experiment? It is possible to be pre-med, take the sacraments daily, and lead the Christian life. However, if it had not been possible, the experiment would not have been a failure, because I would have learned that my life needed to take a different professional direction. The decision to follow the advice of Dr. Curlin has totally reshaped the way I live my life, but it was a scary decision to make. This scary decision to put the first things first and to keep relationships first was only possible because I am blessed with incredible friends and other students and professors who guided me along the way. Aristotle, in Nicomachean Ethics, says, "But the friendship of the good is good and increases in goodness because of their association. They seem to become even better men by exercising their friendship and improving each other. For the traits that they admire in each other get transferred to themselves." Some of the good friends who inspired me to this ideal, laid forth by Dr. Curlin, started an organization at Baylor last year called the Christian Pre-Health Fellowship. This is a shameless plug. Which is already doing amazing things for the pre-health community at Baylor. Now, fellowship is the key word here, and I guess Christian is pretty key as well. They started this organization because they saw a need for both a Christ-centered pre-medical group and for one that was focused on encouraging and lifting up one's fellow pre-meds. Baylor is already rare in that the pre-med organizations here aren't too competitive, unlike other schools where the cutthroat atmosphere makes even members of the same organization hostile to one another. Not a good way to foster good, compassionate physicians, I might say. However, my friends still thought that there was a need for an organization that was truly a fellowship of friends. And so Christian Pre-Health Fellowship began, and it has become so much more than a community. It has become a group of friends. These students meet Monday through Friday at 7:30 a.m. to begin the day in prayer. They encourage one another in their professional paths and their walks with Christ. This panel has the tagline, "Why community is good, but friendship is better." And I think this distinction is made clear by the relationships I see in Christian Pre-Health Fellowship. This is not a loose community of people who share a common aim of medicine, but a group of friends who, building upon a foundation of friendship with God, know each other's names, will the good of one another, and help and inspire each other along the path of faith. So, a final quote and a final story. This one about a physician who showed me an example of healing through friendship. Hippocrates says that wherever the art of medicine is loved, there is also a love of humanity. Sadly, this is not always true, but the following is an example of when it certainly proved to be. The practice of medicine, as I see it, is not being a technician who relieves suffering, but being someone who comes alongside patients with compassion and offers them true healing. 2 summers ago, I was shadowing a family friend, Dr. Andrew Mayo, back in my home state, Minnesota. Dr. Mayo is a family practice physician who works in a very rural setting. After watching him with a couple of patients, I noticed a few things. 1, he always seemed relaxed with his patients, taking the time to tell them a story and listen to their questions. 2, he was way behind his schedule, so behind. And 3, his patients didn't seem to care. They loved him. So the next patient, Mrs. X, was 82 years old. Her chart said that she was presenting with a pain in her knee. Before entering her room, Dr. Mayo turned to me saying, "This will be an interesting case for you. Mrs. X is a very sweet person." The second Mrs. X saw Dr. Mayo, she gave him a big smile, which he returned. Both were genuinely happy to see one another. Through the course of the exam, Dr. Mayo very seriously discussed with her the problems in her knee, asked about the pain in her elbow, which she came for last month, and questioned her about her grandkids that lived out of state. Mrs. X was truly a delightful elderly woman, and by the time her appointment was over and Dr. Mayo was telling her to come back in a month for a checkup, I was sad to see her leave. But before we went in to see the next patient, Dr. Mayo stopped me and asked what I had thought. Not knowing what he expected me to say, I simply said that Mrs. X seemed very nice, and I hoped the therapy Dr. Mayo had suggested would work for her. Then Dr. Mayo told me something very interesting. That Mrs. X's knee pain could be solved with 2 Tylenol tablets, and there was no need for her to come back the next month. I looked at him confused, and he explained, "It is not physical healing that Mrs. X needs. She is lonely. So I make sure she has an appointment every couple of weeks so she can come in and have someone to listen to her." This was not medical care by any technical standard, but it was the healing act of a friend, and more potent than any whole bottle of Tylenol. In the Rule of St. Benedict writes about the ear of the heart, and this is the ear that Dr. Mayo heard Mrs. X with. So, I have been given so much hope by my friends and by the bonds of friendship. I am so grateful that friendship with God and neighbor has been integral to my time at Baylor, that it has sustained and inspired me, and that I got to share my excitement for the virtue of friendship with y'all today. And I'll give my final words to Alred of Rivaux. "No medicine is more valuable, none better suited to the cure of all our temporal ills, than a friend to whom we may turn for consolation in time of trouble, and with whom we may share our happiness in time of joy.
Well, I will tell you, as I was preparing for today, I thought about sharing some stories from when I was at Baylor. And that was a very different time than our earlier speakers. And I was kind of thinking through it and was talking to my daughter, and she was asking some questions about Baylor. And she finally asked something. I said, Hannah, I don't know. I said, it was just so different then. There was a lot that was similar, but lots different. I said, we didn't even text, and she was like, oh, well, how did you communicate, Mom? Yeah, what? And I was like, well, we spoke to each other, actually. It's a whole different thing. And the more I thought, I was like, we didn't even have cell phones. And I was like, we didn't have email. And I started going through, by the time I looked up, her face was so horrified. Like, she was like, Mom, I'm sorry. I was like, it's okay, it's fine. So my experiences feel a little bit different as far as that goes. I will tell you, though, I would like to approach it from the workplace standpoint. As being in HR, what I've seen about friendship is that being a good friend is exactly what it takes to be successful in the workplace. Being a good friend is being a good employee. Being a good friend is being a part of that community. And there's some things that all of us can do to help, regardless of what major you have, what your career ends up being. Each of us can do certain things. We never really take a class, or I didn't. I was in the business school for undergrad. Some of you are in engineering, some of you are pre-med. We don't take courses on friendship. We don't take courses on, gosh, how do I do that? How we learn is we watch and we see and we know how somebody helps us to feel. And we help others hopefully feel better about things. And so these are not things I really learned in a class. They're more just things that I learned from seeing people and experiencing, again, people in community. The first thing is, if you want to be a great friend, be a great listener. That's another one that I have a master's in communications, and I never took a listening class. And that would have served me very, very well many, many times, to not speak but to listen. Good friends listen to each other. Think about the friend that you have that can ask you questions and remember details about your life that you're not even really convinced that you remember. Remember that friend that will say to you, and maybe even say the name of a sibling that you have, or remember possibly your mom and dad's name, or a friend of yours from back home. And you think, wow, that's unusual. I'll never forget the first boss I had. I worked at USAA, which is a fairly large company in San Antonio, and the boss that I had, he had probably 120, 130 people that reported to him, and yet he knew details about our lives. Not in a creepy way at all, in a way that I care about you, and you're so important to what we do here. As a matter of fact, when we had our first son, Andrew, I came back to work, and there was a box on my desk, and I was like, oh, and they said, Paul brought that by when he found out that you'd had Andrew. And so I opened this box, and it was the smallest little pair of Nike running shoes that you've ever seen. They were so cute. And especially now, I wish running shoes were that cheap now, for him. I look at those little ones. But the reason that was so meaningful is I run. And he had remembered, he had seen at one point I'd run a 5K or 10K, and that had stuck in his mind. And the card was short, and it said, Cheryl, your son will need these to keep up with you. So glad you're back. Love, Paul. He cared enough about me to know me and to pay attention. It wasn't the gift. It wasn't that they were Nike running shoes. What it was that he knew me and he cared about me. that same son, Andrew, the one who's actually a freshman here today, we had an experience when he was 3. He had open heart surgery. And so some of you in the room are parents, and you, as you hear me say that, go, what was that like? And I'll tell you, it was a really wonderful time in the sense that we had to rely on our faith and medical professionals that loved us and listened to us and heard. I'll never forget, though, one time he had come out of surgery, and we were really in recovery, and we were in his room. And the cardiologist was talking to me. He said, okay, Cheryl, here's the thing. We've got this machine hooked up. If it blips, and he kind of gave an example, if it stops during this one point, really need to be careful and let somebody know. Because when it happens, and there's a lot going on, in this. I don't know if, I thought that before that experience, I thought hospitals were someplace you went to rest. And it's not that way. They're very loud places. I was like, shh, be quiet. It was so loud, and crash carts and all these things happening. And so he's talking to me. I said, the machine just did it. He said, no. It didn't. I was like, I'm pretty sure it did. And the sound kind of keeps going again, and he keeps talking, and I said, I think it did that thing you said again. And he goes, no, and then it did it again. And so finally he walked over, and he goes, it is doing it. He's like, luckily nothing's wrong, but the machine is giving off a false positive here, so we'll change it up, and we'll change it around. And then he said, it's amazing that you could hear that with everything going on. Well, why could I hear it? I really actually don't literally hear very well at all. Well, the reason I could hear is because that's our whole world right there. And so to listen with that love and listen with that care, to be a good friend, you listen. And you listen with love, and you listen with care. Another thing that really helps, I guess the second thing that all of us can do to be a really good friend, is always assume positive intent. As a friend, when people do things, I want you to try to always assume that they are doing that for good. When your roommate leaves something, a T-shirt on the floor, or when or maybe a lot more than that. Actually, I haven't been into a dorm room this week anyway. When your roommate makes a mess, when they don't show up, when that friend maybe says something, if you can just train your mind to assume that they're doing that for good, or that they're doing the best they can do, you slowly start to realize that your life goes from thinking that sometimes maybe people are out to get you. One time we had an employee, not here at Baylor, but at another place I worked, and they were telling me this thing about this employee. And they did this, and da-da-da. And I was going to talk about assuming positive intent. I go, listening to you, I kind of feel like maybe this person has a secret room at their home, and your picture's up there, and there's maps and darts, and the person's like, you know what, I bet they do. I was like, okay, now we've gone into a whole new reality here. And I said, think about how ridiculous that is. They're doing the best they can do, just like you are. When we can assume that people aren't trying to make life miserable, they're doing the best they can do. And if they're their friends, they're doing the best, even though it may not seem like that sometimes. They're doing the best they can do. And the third one is be a friend who's a good friend to people that aren't like you. Find people that are different than you. If every single thing that you can think about you have in common, you probably need to ask, well, why is that? Am I afraid to meet somebody that has this? Do I not think I can connect with people that are different? Because I'll tell you, there's a secret. We're instantly, and usually at the very beginning, very attracted to people that have commonalities with us. But over time, we learn the most, and a lot of times have richer friendships with people that are different than us. That was one of the things that was so interesting to me when I went to HR. We trained people how to recruit and how to really select people, and we'd say try to really look for people that are a little bit different, because that makes for a great team. And instantly, the very first steps, people would find someone that was like them. One time I actually had a person who was on a selection team, and they selected a person, they had the exact same tie on, and they didn't even realize it. I was like, did you notice that he had the same tie on? And they're like, no, but I did like his tie. Yeah. I was like, well, sure you did. You picked it for yourself also. So it's an instant thing that typically, without even realizing it, even when we try to get our minds not to do that, we are attracted to that. But over time, when we look at that landscape, the richest friendships and the richest relationships are actually developed with people that are different than us. So think about that. And always asking yourself, how do I not only gain from this friendship and relationship, and what am I receiving, but also, what am I giving? And a lot of times when we're thinking about the things that we most want to receive, a little trick is to give it. What you want, give first. And see how it comes back to you by way of that friend and that friendship.
When I think about friendship, it's hard for me to not think about two very important people in my life. One of those is my friend Cody, who is a Truett graduate, and then my father, Saul Roldan. They have taught me so much about friendship. And as I was preparing for this and thinking about, what am I going to say? I don't feel like I'm, the best friend that never existed, but I do have friends, so, and I don't want to disappoint Dr. Davis, so I didn't agree to it. But the thing that kept coming to mind was, grace makes friendship work. And we learn grace, along with the other Christian virtues, from church. And two stories come to mind. The first one is graduating and trying to find a job, a position at a church to serve it takes up a lot of time. It becomes a full-time job, and my friend Cody, we try to continue conversation and be always constant communication, and I got busy. I got very busy for him, and he wasn't going to let that happen, which I'm so thankful for. And so he'd email me and text and call, and I remember one of those times, I just felt like a terrible friend, and we decided to just have a conversation about that. And I remember apologizing and confessing and saying, I've gotten too busy for you, and I apologize. And I'll never forget what he told me in an email and through text, and all the different ways that we communicated. He said, Emmanuel, thank you for being honest and confessing that. It's okay. I love you, and I'm with you. And most importantly, God loves you, and He's with you. And that's stuck with me. And the other story is the person that I mentioned is my father. I wrecked my dad's truck once, and you don't get between a man and his truck, an hombre and his truck. You just don't do that. And I tried to play it off. There's a huge red gash from my car, and I couldn't play it off. It was obviously from my car. But I'll never forget what he told me. I remember going to my mediator, my paraclete, my mother, and saying, Dad, Mom, I did this to Dad's truck. I'm so sorry. What do you think he'll say? Can you help me out? And she said, I don't know. You talk to your father. You're the one that did it. So I had to go face to face with the judge. And I go and I say, Dad, I'm sorry. I wrecked your truck. I was running late for work. Do I go to work now, or should I stay and fix this? And I'll never forget what he told me. He said, Emmanuel, there's nothing that has been broken that cannot be fixed. Go your way, and this will get taken care of. Grace. Grace is what makes friendship work. And we learn that from the church. Now, I don't know what my dad was doing that morning. Maybe he was brushing up on his eschatology. Maybe he was reading some N.T. Wright, reading about the restoration of all things in the end. And I don't know what my friend Cody was doing that morning. Maybe he was, brushing up on his theology, maybe reading some Bart, learning that about the God revealed in Jesus Christ who is with us. Actually, maybe he was, because he did go to Truett. Maybe he was in Dr. Bender's class at that time, I think. But I don't know. But what I do know is I don't think they were doing that. I haven't asked them. But my dad, I think, was doing the same thing that he had been doing for 28 years. Just serving as a deacon at our local small Baptist church, faithfully serving members and sitting under the preaching of a pastor. And my friend Cody, maybe it was years of vacation Bible school that he was at, learning and singing the songs and memorizing the Bible verses that he learned in church or in Sunday school. I strongly believe that friendship is vital to healing our brokenness. And I cannot think of friendship without first thinking of them. And I know that their experience, years of being and serving at church, is what allowed for these instances to occur, for grace to happen. And it was at the church that they learned those things. Now, when you talk about blessings and challenges of friendship, the blessings that I've experienced is being able to speak honestly and being able to hear honest words. And at the same time, hearing a word of forgiveness. And the challenge is sometimes I think you get a big old gash in your truck. And you have to work through that. But I have been so blessed personally growing up in the church and learning what it is to listen, to hear a confession, and to be able to be forgiven. And so when I think about friendship, I think about those things. And so I hope that is a blessing and an encouragement as well as a challenge to you all today. Thank you.
We want to open up our time first for you all to react to things that you've heard one another say, if that, and if not, I've got a question or two I wanted to ask. So anything that you all would want to say just to respond to one another as you begin. Bryson?
Did you pay for the truck?
I did not.
Was that your first accident?
I think so. That was in high school. Yeah. It happened in the driveway. I didn't have to go very far.
Was it a moving violation?
Yeah, I think so. At least, yeah, I felt like one. Yeah.
You one-up me. My first collision was with a car wash. I still get a little skittish when I go in. Other things that you'd want to ask or reflect upon. Very rich reflections from all four of you. I want to ask this. We've done really well in emphasizing the role of presence, of listening, of encouragement. But I'm also mindful of the way in which Christian friendship, because it's the deepest expression of charity, requires us to challenge one another. St. Thomas Aquinas devotes quite a lot of attention to the notion of brotherly correction. Not a kind of heavy-handed judgmentalism, but always animated by charity, the way in which sometimes when we see one another heading off course, we speak into a situation or maybe draw attention through humor. Would anyone be so bold as to say times in which someone has offered fraternal correction to you in which it's been really important? Because it really is important, and it's a deep part of friendship. If our friends can't help us out when we're in need, when we're veering slightly off course, who'll do that for us?
Yeah, I will say the verse in the New Testament, speak the truth in love, is one that I think sometimes we don't think about or take as seriously. If you love people, you will be honest and you'll be truthful. And that doesn't mean brutally honest. It certainly doesn't mean cruel. There's nothing about that. But that you love somebody enough to be uncomfortable to share with them a truth that can help them be better. And think about you when you've found out something that didn't go as well, or maybe you just weren't even aware that something had gone wrong, and someone tells you. You may be upset at first a little bit that you didn't do it quite right or whatever else, but ultimately I think most of us are grateful that we had the chance to do it better, or we had the chance to ask for forgiveness or whatever might be there. Those are the things that I think we need to read those as carefully, speaking the truth in love, and make sure we're giving feedback and loving people through that way as well.
That's great.
Okay, so I have an example in a story where I was fraternally corrected, I guess. I used to ride horses a lot as a child, and we had a riding instructor that was like 25. She was a really good friend of ours. We'd spend the whole summer living with her in Maryland and going to different horseback riding competitions. And we was myself and two of my best friends, and we were probably about 15, 16. And the schedule we'd have was kind of crazy because our riding instructor, Dory, we were in charge of taking care of the horses. We had to get up super early. We'd often go to bed really late after cleaning everything up. And I remember one competition we had to for sure be up by 5 a.m. to get the horses watered and fed before our competition that started at 9. And we were really tired. We were so tired. And we had to sleep on this carpet floor of some like barn place, and it was very bad. And I just remember the alarm going off, and all of us just being like, the horses will be fine if we go out there at 6 o'clock. Like, it's gonna be fine. We're just gonna go back to bed. So we went back to sleep for another hour, went out, fed and watered the horses, but somehow Dory found out. I don't really know how, but she knew that we hadn't been out there at 5. So right before we were about to start to compete, she was coaching us, and she was just like, girls, I'm going to need to talk to y'all later today. And we all knew like exactly what she was going to talk to us about. And the rest of the day, we just were in anguish because we loved this woman so much. She had given so much for us. She spent every day with us. She put so much into who we were. And I remember just waiting for her to start to give us her talk at the end of the day. We were all sitting in the truck, and she just said very simply, girls, I'm really disappointed in you. And just that realization that we had breached that contract of trust that is so necessary for friendship. breach that reliability that is so necessary for friendship will really stay with me. And just to remember that it goes both ways. You must give and you must receive. And there must be trust involved in that relationship.
So life post-graduation is difficult in finding a job and, place to serve. You have a lot of people telling you what you should and shouldn't do, and so in the process of that, I had a friend who in DC was telling me, you need to take this position, you need to do this. And I said, well, I'll pray about it, okay. And so I did, and sought counsel, and just from all these different people, and then I came back to him. I was terrified to tell him, like, I don't think I'm going to take it. I'm sorry. And so I told him, and we're on the phone, but if I could have seen him, I think he said, okay, well, tell me about that. And so I was like, all right, well, I'll tell you why I didn't take it. So I gave him this long explanation, and it was just very spiritual, and just, I even quoted Henry Nouwen, and just, it was just, I'd been telling about my quiet times and just everything. And then I said, I'm 100% confident that this is where I'm supposed to be, at a different place. And he said, well, I think you're 100% wrong. And I was like, wow. But I quoted Henry Nouwen. And so then he said, but I still love you. And I care about you enough to tell you. If I didn't care about you, I'd just pretend to be celebrating with you. And I don't think anyone had ever been that honest with me before. And I really felt that he was being honest and loving and saying that. And that was powerful. And I'll never forget that.
That's great.
So,
Russell?
Yes, sir. So, little background. So one, my girlfriend is not around here. She's from out of town. And so when we get together, it's important because we don't get to spend a lot of time together. Also, I grew up with 2 little brothers, and my 3 best friends were all guys. And so I spent a lot of time with guys growing up. The only girl I was ever really around was my mom. Like the house, there's 4 guys, one woman. So I didn't spend a lot of time, kind of learning how to adjust to certain things that females do. Just how you're supposed to appreciate things, how you're supposed to respond. I didn't grow up with a lot of that because my mom was very, she adjusted to us. To my dad, me, and my 2 little brothers. It was us, and then my mom took care of what she needed to. So having a girlfriend, and coming from that background, you're going to clash at times. And so I appreciate that of my friends, some of my best friends, one of them, he really pushes me to kind of step outside of what I know and think more about her and not myself, especially when we're together. For instance, she would come to town, and instead of us going on a date, it would be her, myself, and my 2 little brothers, which, I say that, and it's like, man, that's stupid. Why would you take your 2 little brothers on a date with you? But for me, because I grew up with them, and that was all I knew, I was like, well, yeah, I'm going to go and have fun. Y'all want to come have fun too? Like, let's go do this. And so, and the first couple times that happened, she was happy. She's like, yeah, your brothers are sweet, so fun. But then she's like, why don't you ever do anything with me? And I heard her say that. I'm like, why are you being a girl? Like, stop being dramatic. It's okay. we're having a good time. But I had that friend who came, and he was like, no, Bryson, you're being stupid. Like, why aren't you going and doing stuff with her? Like, she came all this way to be with you, but she has to be with Jordan and Ethan. Like, that's not fair to her. And so having that and being challenged that way, again, I'm not perfect, and I still kind of do stuff with my brothers when she's around. But for instance, this upcoming Christmas, I'm planning, what I can do where I can show her I appreciate her a whole lot more, instead of being like, hey, let's all 4 of us go and do this and do that. Because, yeah, my brothers are fun, but there's a time for everything, and I wouldn't really grasp that if I didn't have somebody who's willing to be like, Bryson, she might be being dramatic, but you're the wrong one this time. You need to fix what you're doing. So
that's great. Why do you think the practice of friendship, if it has challenges, particularly in the world in which we live, why is it difficult sometimes for us? You can look at this personally. You can look at it from the perspective of the big world in which we live culturally. Look at it here at Baylor. Why is it the challenge that it is, if it is?
I think there's just a lot of noise. So kind of the listening story that I shared a moment ago, there was lots of physical noise, but I think we just have a lot of noise in our environment. And so the goal of friendship sometimes isn't valued as highly, or it's very easy to be distracted from that.
I shared in my experience a little bit about time. And I heard a common thread, I think, between everyone on here about talking about time, there not being enough time. And I know personally that's a challenge for me is time. I mean, I'm willing to buy my friends stuff, you know. I'm willing to go and I don't know. I think I'm generous, but with my money. But time is very difficult for me to give. So I think that presents a challenge. Which is sometimes tied up to other things. You know, for me, sometimes it's pride or So time, I think, is big.
I identify 100% with Emmanuel on that. Like, it takes time, but also it's extremely uncomfortable because you have to be, willing to accept what other people want to do, but also be willing to say it. And sometimes it's easy for us to correct another person, but when we know we've done wrong and it's time for somebody to come down on us, the first thing you want to do is kind of turn around and go do better, or you just never bring it up, and then they never have to correct you, but you never grow that way, and they don't get to grow either. And so that I guess the vulnerability that's required for friendship is what makes it hard a lot of times.
That's really good.
I've heard Dr. Davis give this example before about how obsessed with individuality our culture is. Talked about how there are like 25 different flavors of Triscuit. You can go to the store and you can get your cheesy Triscuits or your garlic-flavored ones, your sweet Triscuits, whatever. Whenever you get tired of a flavor of Triscuit, you just get the next kind. And that's fine. But friendships aren't like that. You don't get to just pick your flavor for one day and then, got tired of Jimmy, guess I'll go on to Sally now. There's really a difference there. But that freedom to just take whatever we want whenever we want it is so ingrained in us, I think. The other thing that I see as a challenge to friendship now is our focus on autonomy. We're so focused on being our own self, not needing anyone else, and to rely on another seems like a weakness or a bad thing. But I think reliance on another is a beautiful thing and something that is necessary for friendship.
From the floor, are there questions or observations that you'd like to ask these four sources of wisdom and practitioners of friendship? Yes, sir. Carlos.
We have some stories, but usually have to do with coffee, probably. And then I was blessed to know and to work also for us as one of the chaplains. And I am thankful, especially Emmanuel and other seminary students were friends to me when I just went through a very difficult crisis that some of you know too. And
These are great jobs, biking and recording. And I posted on Facebook, and my mom said, "I hope you weren't biking while you took that video." That was the time, right? Yeah.
Who says that you cannot bike and record? And within seconds, your mom says, I do.
That's true. Block that out.
Other comments or questions? Yes, Dr. Wood.
What do you do about broken friendships for speaking the truth and sharing witnesses? Do you ask for forgiveness of those who you offend? About broken friendships.
That's a great question.
Reconciliation and forgiveness is so critical, and it's probably one of the things that we don't talk about as much because it's not cookie cutter at all. It's so different. I think sometimes that's where you really feel the sense of how dependent a friendship is on that other person, when perhaps you've done what you should have done and asked for forgiveness, and maybe that's not received. But knowing that at that point, that's where the cord of three is not easily broken, and that's really, I think, where the Lord and His grace and wisdom is able to sometimes soften the heart of the other individual, but sometimes it's softening your heart to understand that you've done what you can do. Making sure that you're modeling reconciliation, forgiveness, making sure you're not saying trite statements like, I could never forgive them for that. Sure you can, because you live as a forgiven person. And so I think sometimes embodying those, but I agree, it's probably one of the hardest things. And I think when speaking of time and everything else, a lot of times it takes such a great amount of time, and we can't see from that point what it's going to be in the future. So definitely a tough subject.
That's great, Cheryl. Any other things? Yes, Dr. Wood. Yes, sir.
My experience has been, it was so sad at this point in life, and that one is spirit broken, those I described, usually they're not. Many of us are getting to the theologian named Stanley Howells, who says that for Christians to embrace a tragic vision of life, regard is extremely important. I disagree with Mr. Goldman. He's talking about his truck. I know. Many things that are broken God fixed. Perhaps broken Christians.
If you'll permit me first to thank these who have come, also to thank Dr. Todd Steele, Dr. Randall Bradley, who will convene the Vesper service here at 3 o'clock, and we'll break in about 5 minutes to allow them to get ready for that. I want to reflect upon this notion of remembering our hope. And that phrase has been tumbling in my mind for the last several weeks. And I connected it up to a dear friend of mine. He's not a contemporary of mine, quite a lot older. He died last May at the age of 95. He was my pastor growing up in Amarillo, Dr. Winfred Moore. Incredibly important to the church in Amarillo, to the city of Amarillo, incredibly important here at Baylor University. I was able to go visit Dr. Moore about 6 weeks before he died. And Dr. Moore he'd been my pastor growing up. He baptized me. I listened to him preach. He had the voice of God. It was bigger than life. And in the years of my adulthood, especially after the death of my father, he grew into a real precious friend, something akin to mutuality, although I don't think I never could quite envision mutuality with Dr. Moore. We were great email friends. I saved every one of the emails he ever wrote me. There were about 150 in a Winford Moore file in my Outlook. I've got a voicemail that I saved from him at the office. Dr. Moore's place in my life was really important because when I was about 11 years old, I'll never forget, it was a cold, snowy December morning in Amarillo, and he came to my house. My mother was there, and my father rushed in. I didn't know quite what was happening. I knew that I had gone down to the church, to the altar the Sunday before. I didn't really quite expect a visit from him, but he sat on the hearth, the roaring fire behind us. My mother made him some spiced tea, and he put his arm around me, and he talked to me about Jesus, what it would be to follow Jesus' example and to be his man, to be his son, to accept baptism and to realize how that called me to a different kind of life. And I was baptized the next evening at the church. When I went to see Dr. Moore about 6 weeks before he died, and it was just the two of us. He was in his wheelchair. His mind and his spirit were as active and as vital as always, but his 95-year-old body was giving out. And I kneeled down to him. And I knew good and well it would be the last time I'd be in his presence. And I patted him on the shoulder, and I did something I'd never done with him. I kissed him on the head. And I said, "You've been a wonderful friend to me. And I'm grateful for your life, and I love you." And he looked up to me, and in that voice, he said, "I love you too." And then as I turned to walk out the door, he said to me, "I remember that Saturday morning." Now, it had happened 30-some-odd years ago. And certainly he had made many trips to folks' homes to talk to them about following Jesus and what a life with Christ would mean. But it was a special gift to me from him to say, "I remember that Saturday morning," because he was calling me to remember my hope and our hope, the hope that we find in Christ. Thank you all so much for being here. Thank you for the blessing of your presence, the reflection on friendship, the ways in which that is fundamental to the community that we're so blessed to be a part of here at Baylor. Will you please join me in thanking these here? And Dr. Steele and Dr. Bradley, thank you so much. And Vesper service will begin at 3 o'clock. Thank you.